Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me for another one-man review. I'm going to be looking at Two Brothers by Fabio Moon and Gabriel Ba. This is from Dark Horse. Um, I'm a huge fan of both of these artists. I really like Gabriel Ba. Fabio Moon's really good as well, but Gabriel Ba's finish I like. So I he's more like a Mike Mignola if you're not familiar of his work. They're twin brothers though. Not sure why the last names are different and what the story on that is, but I know that they're both twin brothers from Brazil, the artists. So it's especially interesting that they're doing a book about twin brothers. That's apparently a very famous this is based on a very famous novel by Milton Hatoum, who's also, from what the book says, a Brazilian author. So that's really interesting. I can see why they were drawn to this book. In terms of what Fabio Moon and Gabriel Ba's relationship is versus what the relationship of the brothers in this book is, it seems that they're polar opposites because Moon and Ba are kind of, if you know who they are, they're well known for being brothers that are creative partners and have been for a long time. And I'm sure they have their fights, but they're obviously a very powerful team. Their book Day Tripper is amazing. They both worked on Casanova with Matt Fraction. Gabriel Ba worked on Umbrella Academy. They've done a ton of other works together. Some Neil Gaiman, how to talk to girls, how to pick up girls at parties or something like that. So I'm assuming their relationship is different than the one encoded here, but I can totally see why it's like, man, if this is gonna be translated in comics, this has to be the two guys to do it. And it is a great book. It's a beautiful book. I don't know, and I don't know how their collaboration goes. I don't know if they can mimic each other's styles. Their styles are pretty obviously different to me. So this looks like a Gabriel Ba book to me. The finish of it. Maybe Fabio Moon's doing layouts, or maybe they can ink each other's work, or I don't know. I don't know how it works, but the artwork looks like Gabriel Ba to me. And I'm a huge fan of his work, and you can see here why it's this really like sharp type of artwork, very Mike Mignola influence, but with a way greater breadth of type of things he can draw, but the same kind of design sensibility, spotting of black. There's a lot of Sergio Topi in there. Like this tree to me looks like, okay, you take Sergio Topi and strip out all of the excess cross-hatching, some of which you get down here, but you just focus on his use of shape and design and negative space that shows up in the work as well. There's a lot of Eduardo Hisso in here, I think, as well, in terms of like the clean line with the really strongly well spotted blacks, but not afraid to go into like intense details. So like this crowd scene here. This just amazingly designed black and white artwork. I'm really glad this book's printed in black and white. It could have looked gorgeous in color. They usually work with Dave Stewart, I believe, who always does a great job coloring their work, but I really like seeing it in black and white. So, gorgeous book. Love to have it on my shelf. We'll be picking it up and slobbering over it and stealing from it a lot, I'm sure. In terms of the story, it's really nice. It's a really nice, like, straightforward piece of literature, drama. I'm always skeptical about adapting written books into comics because there can be a lot of this where you're just taking what I'm assuming are straight up paragraphs out of the book and illustrating them straight up. So there is some of that in here where it's like, man, I love your drawings. I don't really need them because the text is doing the work, or maybe there's a way to get rid of some of the text and just let the dialogue and the pictures do it for you. But for the most part in this book, that levels out in the artwork. So astonishing that it doesn't really matter. So the story is about a woman. It starts out with the woman who's dying, and she's really wishing that her two sons, the twins, would reconcile. And then the story just goes into the family history and what the problems between the twins are, and how the mother and father met, and an adopted character, and some betrayals and things like that. The twins are Omar and Jakob. I'm assuming is how you pronounce the name. They are of Middle Eastern descent, but the parents have immigrated to Brazil, and so they grew up there. And Jakob gets sent back home for a stretch, whereas Omar stays. He gets sent back to Lebanon for a number of years, and because the family can't afford to have both people there or something. And so there's bitterness about that, obviously. Like, why did Omar get to stay? We're a very rich family, and I had to go back and live in some village outside of Lebanon. There's definite favorites between the parents. Jakob is the favorite of the father, and Omar is the favorite of the mother. The mother's the one who forces the father to send Jakob away. They at one point get in a fight. They both are in love with the same girl, and Omar's the one who gets her, and they get into a fight. And Omar, being the more aggressive one of the two, the more physically capable, wins and uses a bottle to cut Jakob's face and gives him a scar. But in the text, and this is credit to the author, I'm going to forget, Milton Hatoum. This is in the original story. I don't think it's something that Moon and Ba added to it. They're talking about the scar. They're talking about the scar was already beginning to grow in Jakob's body, and you can see that they're not talking about the physical scar. They're talking about the emotional scars and the bitterness between the brothers that persists throughout the rest of their life, and the division in the family. So yeah, really good, well observed, just literature. Now, in terms of literature, there and comics mixed, there's pages like this where it really does just feel like they're taking text out of the book. So I'll read it for you. His eyes focused on the girl in the middle of the room. He took 3 steps towards Zana. This is the parents' meeting, by the way, Zana being the mother. Stood up straight and began to declaim the verses one by one in a firm, deep, melodious voice, accompanied by enraptured gestures with his hands. Zana, a girl of 15, was stunned and took shelter by her father. The expression on Halim's face, the twins' father in his youth, his gaze fixed on Zana, and every pore seemed to exude the heady wine of happiness. As he finished it, he stared at Zana, his eyes full of promise, with a hungry, docile look. A solemn silence underlied the power and meaning of his gaze. Then he left the Byblos. 2 months later, he was back as Zana's husband. So, the beautiful piece of language, and I see why they kept it, and I see why they celebrated the book. I don't know that needed any of this. In fact, for as powerful of artists as they are, I feel like these drawings are pretty weak compared to what's being described in the text. Like, maybe he'd been writing her this poem, and he decides to read her the poem. So this page here, where they kind of stare at each other and he stares her down, that's more powerful. When you zoom in on these faces and then you look at these houses, it's kind of simple. So there are times where I feel like the text left alone is more powerful, or they could have just like had him read her the poem. I don't think they needed this. As nice as the language is, his firm, deep, melodious voice accompanied by enraptured gestures, they seem to cut against each other in some places. So that's always the risk for me of adapting a piece of literature, is you can fall too in love with the language. There's obviously a biblical component to this, where Jacob and Omar are born, with Omar being the second child. He was the youngest, the Kakula, I think is how you would pronounce that. He's number 2. Omar was a little darker and had more hair. My little black monkey, my hairy little boy. So to me, that feels very biblical, although in the Bible, the hairy beast is the firstborn. So it's like an inversion of the biblical tale, with Jacob being the firstborn in this case. And it is kind of an inversion of that story, where the mother really prefers Omar. Well, she prefers the secondborn, which would line up with the biblical, but he doesn't really succeed in taking the rights of the firstborn. So the story is inverted that way. Jakob goes on and becomes a very successful mathematician and engineer, and Omar's kind of a layabout prodigal son type of figure. And there's a lot of bitterness between them about the different successes as well. Here's just some more of the just lovely designs, beautiful art, some more of that Sergio Topi influence. You can see the Eduardo Hizzo and the Mike Mignola as well. There's scenes like this where I see Munoz, the kind of black and white jazz comics that Munoz did. That really shows up. I think it's a lovely scene. It's a lot of motion and energy. And in this scene here, it's a very powerful scene in my mind where you see the dangers of the permissive mother, the enabling mother, the mother that loves her son too much. She's very much up in Omar's life. She knows that he's been hanging out with the prostitute, and I know exactly who that woman is. She'll drain you dry. She'll bewitch you. They're the same. She's going to drive you crazy. And Omar says about Jakob, you've got the other son who gives you nothing but joy and has a good job. Now it's my turn to live, me and my woman, far away from you. And then he turns to father and says, far away from you too, far away from this house, from all of you. Don't come after me. There's nothing to be done. So this is where he goes like on his prodigal son journey, but he never really comes back and is accepted in a positive way. But it's because the mother is always enabling him, and for a while he tries to fight for his freedom, but that doesn't really lead to much in the end, unfortunately. And I don't want to give away too much about the end of the book. It's not a positive story at all. It's a tragedy for sure. Really well told. But this quote that not ends the book, but very close to the end of the book, I really like. Some of our desires are only fulfilled by others. Our nightmares belong to us. And I thought that's one of those things that they had to have taken right out of the book. That's the kind of thing that when I'm reading a book, especially a book, comics can get away with because of the art. I can just enjoy the art. But if I'm reading something that's purely linguistic, those are the kind of things I'm looking for. Those one or two sentences that gut punch me, that drop a wisdom and knowledge of life on me, some truth in a few sentences. And that one really, I think is worth repeating, is some of our desires are only fulfilled by others. Our nightmares belong to us. So I think that's a really kind of good place to end the review of the book on, and I'm glad it came at the end of the book. It summed up the theme of the whole book, I think. Thank you for following along. Take it away, Jack.